Life is a series of Mercury dreams, fluid, reflective, and constantly changing right before your very eyes in a burst of light. Dive into these ever-shifting stories of the heart and find your own reflection in our art. Subscribe today and follow the flow of our cinematic masterpiece. They thought I was just a tired old man who didn't know what was happening around him. They were wrong. Before I tell you how I found out the truth, my wife spent 30 years building, and how I used it to take back everything. Go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to Revenge Chronicles. Because this story is going to change the way you think about the quiet people in your life. My name is Walter. I am 68 years old. I spent 31 years as a civil engineer for the county of Macon, Georgia. I built bridges. I calculated load-bearing stress. I measured how much weight a structure could hold before it collapsed. I was good at my job, but I was never good at reading people. That was always Margaret's gift. Not mine. Margaret and I met at a church picnic in the summer of 1979. She was 24 years old, wearing a yellow dress, laughing at something her cousin said. I walked over and introduced myself and never really left. We were married 11 months later. We had 2 children, our son, Daniel, and our daughter, Patricia. We built a life the slow and steady way. A house on Crestwood Drive, a vegetable garden in the backyard, Friday night, dinners that stretched into Saturday morning conversations. For 37 years, Margaret was my compass. She always knew which direction we were supposed to go. She was diagnosed with ovarian cancer in the spring of 2021. She fought it for 14 months. She was the most graceful fighter I have ever seen. She never complained. She never asked why. She just kept waking up every morning and doing what needed to be done. When she passed away in July of 2022, I felt like someone had removed the load-bearing wall from the center of my chest. I did not know how the rest of the structure was supposed to stay standing. The funeral was on a Thursday. By Saturday morning, Daniel and his wife, I will call her Renee, were already sitting at my kitchen table with a yellow legal pad. I had not slept. I had barely eaten. I was still wearing the same dark suit from 2 days before because I could not figure out how to make myself care about changing clothes. And there they were. Yellow legal pad. 2 pence. Coffee they had made themselves without asking. Daniel said he wanted to talk about the house. I looked at him. I thought I had misheard. I asked him what he meant. He said that Patricia and he had been talking. He said that a house this size was too much for one person to maintain. He said there was a very nice assisted living facility about 20 minutes away in Warner Robins, and that he and Patricia had already taken a tour. He said the people there were very friendly. He said there was a courtyard with a fountain. I sat down slowly in the chair across from them. My hands were on the table. I remember staring at my own hands and thinking about how strange they looked, like they belonged to someone else. Renee reached across and put her hand on top of mine. She said she knew this was hard. She said they just wanted what was best for me. She said the house was a lot to manage for a man my age who was also grieving. She said the word grieving the way people say it when they mean burden. I did not say anything. Daniel slid the yellow legal pad toward me. There were numbers on it. The address of the assisted living facility. A monthly cost. A note that said the house could be listed within 60 days. I picked up the legal pad. I looked at it for a long moment. Then I set it back down and said I was tired and needed to rest. Daniel said they understood. He said they would give me a few days. He said not to worry. That they had already spoken to a realtor. His realtor. A friend of Renee's. I went upstairs. I lay down on the bed. I stared at the ceiling for 4 hours. That was the first day. Over the following 2 weeks, Daniel and Renee came by nearly every day. They brought food I did not want. They offered to help organize Margaret's belongings. They talked about the house constantly, how much it would sell for, what the market was like, how quickly things were moving in our zip code. Patricia called twice from Nashville, where she lived with her husband and their kids. She was softer about it than Daniel. But the message was the same. The house was too much. I needed to be somewhere I could be looked after. I want to be clear about something. I am not a man who fights easily. Margaret used to say I had the patience of a stone wall. She meant it as a compliment. But stone walls, if you leave them alone long enough, grow moss. They become part of the landscape. People start to assume they were always there, and always will be. No matter what anyone does to them. Daniel and Renee had started to assume exactly that about me. What they did not know, what I did not know yet either, was what Margaret had been doing every third Saturday for the last 30 years. I found the envelope 6 weeks after the funeral. I had finally started going through Margaret's desk in the small room she used as an office. It was a roll-top desk, the old-fashioned kind, with small compartments along the back. I had opened all of them before, but there was one section on the far left that had always been stuck. I had tried it a few times over the years and assumed it was just warped wood. That Saturday morning I tried it again, and this time it opened. Inside was a single white envelope with my name on it, written in Margaret's handwriting. Walter. It said. That was all. I sat down on the floor right there. I do not know why. My legs just stopped working. I held the envelope for a long time before I opened it. Inside was a letter. 3 pages. Front and back. In Margaret's careful cursive. And underneath the letter was a business card for an attorney named Gerald P. Arman, with an office address in Macon. On the back of the business card, in red ink, was a note that said, "Call him first. Before you do anything else. He is expecting to hear from you." I read the letter twice before I let myself react to it. Margaret had opened a separate account at a credit union in Bibb County 30 years ago. Not at our regular bank. A different institution entirely. Across town. Where no one knew our family. She had been depositing money into it every third Saturday since 1993. Small amounts at first. Whatever she could set aside from her work as a bookkeeper for a local hardware store. Then larger amounts as the years went on, and she took on more clients. She never told me. Not because she was hiding anything from me in a dishonest way. She explained that clearly in the letter. She said she had watched what happened to her own mother after her father passed, how her brothers had descended immediately. How her mother had been pressured and manipulated until she had almost nothing left. Margaret said she had made a quiet decision in the early years of our marriage that she was going to make sure that would never happen to us. To May. She said she knew my nature. She said I trusted too easily. She said she loved that about me, and she also knew it made me vulnerable. She wrote, "Walter, you built bridges your whole career. You understood that a bridge has to be designed for the heaviest load it might ever have to carry. Not just the average one. I have been building something for you for 30 years. I hope you never need it. But if you are reading this letter, then you do." I sat on the floor of that little office for a very long time. Then I picked up the business card, and I called Gerald P. Armand. He answered on the second ring. He said he had been wondering when I would call. He said Margaret had first come to see him in 2019 to update the documents she had been maintaining with his predecessor since 1998. He said everything was in order. He said I should come in at my earliest convenience, but that there was no emergency. Everything was already done. He said those words the way Margaret would have said them. Calme. Certain. Already done. I went to see Gerald the following Tuesday. I want to describe what it felt like to sit in that office. Because I think it matters. I had spent 6 weeks feeling like a man standing in a house with no foundation. Like any minute, something else was going to shift, and I would not be able to stop it. I had started to wonder, in my worst moments, if maybe Daniel and Renee were right. Maybe I was too old. Maybe the house was too much. Maybe a courtyard with a fountain was not the worst thing in the world. And then Gerald opened a folder and started explaining what Margaret had built. The credit union account had grown through 30 years of steady deposits and conservative investments. She had managed herself to just over $412,000. She had kept it entirely in her name, with a payable on death designation to me, which meant it transferred directly without going through probate. It was already mine. It had been mine since the moment she died. I just had not known it existed. But that was not all. Our house on Crestwood Drive, the house Daniel and Renee wanted to list within 60 days, was not in my name. It was not in Margaret's name. It had been placed into a revocable living trust in 1999. Margaret was the trustee during her lifetime. Upon her death, trusteeship passed to me. The house was an asset of the trust. No one could sell it, list it, or make any decisions about it without the trustee's authorization. Without my authorization, Gerald looked at me over the top of his reading glasses. He said he wanted to make sure I understood what that meant. He said, as trustee, I did not just own the house. I controlled it completely. Any person residing in the house, if they were not on the trust documents, was there at my discretion. I asked him to say that last part again. He said that anyone living in or using the property as a residence, if they were not a named beneficiary with residential rights under the trust, was effectively a guest. And I, as trustee, had full legal authority to revoke that permission. I thought about Daniel and Renee. I thought about the yellow legal pad. I thought about the word grieving, spoken like the word burden. I asked Gerald how I would go about revoking that permission. He opened a second folder. He had already prepared the documents. I drove home feeling, for the first time in 6 weeks, like I recognized my own hands. Daniel and Renee were at the house when I got back. They had let themselves in with the spare key, a key I had given them years ago for emergencies. They were in the living room. Renee had boxes. She was wrapping some of Margaret's decorative pieces in newspaper and placing them carefully in the boxes. She said she thought it would be easier for me if she helped get things organized before the listing. She said some of these pieces might do well at auction. She said she knew a man. I stood in the doorway and looked at the boxes for a moment. Then I said I needed them both to sit down. Daniel looked at Renee. Some signal passed between them that I was not supposed to notice. They sat. I sat across from them. The same chairs as 3 weeks before. But something was different now. I was different. I told them about the trust. I told them the house was not something that could be listed, sold, or decided about by anyone except me. I told them that I had met with an attorney and that everything was in order. I told them that I was not going to a facility in Warner Robins or anywhere else. I told them I was going to continue living in my house, in my garden, in my life. Renee said that was fine, that they were just trying to help. That, of course, the final decision was mine. Daniel said he just wanted to make sure I was okay. He said the attorney thing seemed like a lot. He asked if someone had put ideas in my head. I looked at my son, my boy. I had coached his Little League team. I had sat in the hospital waiting room for 6 hours when his appendix burst. I had taught him to drive in the parking lot of a shopping mall on a Sunday morning. I said that his mother had put ideas in my head 30 years ago, and that I was only now starting to understand how good those ideas were. There was a silence in that room that I will not forget. Daniel started to say something else. I held up one hand. I said I was not finished. I told them that I would also need the spare key back before they left that evening. I told them that the boxes Renee had packed needed to be unpacked before they went. I told them that going forward, if they wanted to visit, they were welcome to call ahead, but that I would need to know the purpose of the visit before I confirmed a time. And I told them that if anyone came to my door representing a real estate firm without my prior request, I would have that conversation with Gerald instead of with them. Renee's face did something complicated. She set down the piece she was holding. Daniel said he thought I was being unfair. I said I thought he was probably right. I said being fair had not served me very well for the past 6 weeks, and I was going to try something different. Patricia called that night. Someone had gotten to her first, because she started the conversation already on the defensive, already explaining that Daniel was just worried, that Renee could be pushy sometimes, but her heart was in the right place. I let her talk. When she was done, I told her the same things I had told Daniel. Calmly. Specifically, without anger. Because Margaret had not raised me to use anger as a tool. She raised me to use clarity. Patricia was quiet for a long time. Then she said Mom would have handled this differently. I said I agreed. I said her mother would have handled it better than I was handling it. But I said her mother had also spent 30 years making sure I would have the chance to handle it at all. And I was not going to waste that. Patricia started crying. Not the manipulative kind. The real kind. She said she had not realized how far things had gone. She said she was sorry. I told her I believed her. I told her she was welcome in my home anytime she wanted to come. I meant it. Things with Daniel and Renee were slower to resolve. They went quiet for several weeks. I did not reach out. I focused on learning the things Margaret had wanted me to learn. I sat with Gerald and went through every document, every account, every decision she had made over 30 years, and why she had made it. It took 4 separate meetings. Each one felt like reading a letter from her. About 3 months after that conversation in the living room, Daniel came by alone. He called first. He said he just wanted to talk. I said that was fine, and I made coffee. He sat at the kitchen table, the same table where he had brought the yellow legal pad, and he did not say anything for a while. Then he said he was sorry. He said things had moved faster than they should have after Mom died, and he had let Renee take the lead on things he should have handled himself. He said he was ashamed. I did not tell him it was fine, because it was not entirely fine. And Margaret taught me not to say things that were not true just to make the air easier to breathe. But I told him I heard him. I told him that the door on Crestwood Drive was always going to have his name on it as far as I was concerned. But that what that door meant going forward was going to be different than what it had been before. He nodded. He looked very tired. He looked like my son. I still live in the house on Crestwood Drive. Margaret's garden came back this spring with more color than I expected. The tomatoes especially. She always said the tomatoes had their own opinions about when to grow. And I have stopped arguing with them. I talk to Gerald every few months, just to stay current. I have learned more about trusts and accounts and what Margaret called the architecture of protection than I ever expected to learn at 68. She knew I was an engineer. She left me a structure and trusted me to understand it once I finally looked at the blueprints. The fountain in Warner Robins is very nice, I am told, but I have a garden. I have a house that is mine, in a way I understand now. Fully and completely. I have the memory of a woman in a yellow dress who spent 30 years building something her husband was too trusting to build for himself, and who loved him enough to do it quietly and wait. She was the real engineer in this family. She always was. If you have someone in your life who is being pressured out of their home, out of their money, out of their own story, please share this video. And if you want to see more stories about people who found their footing when it mattered most, subscribe to Revenge Chronicles. I will see you in the next one.